A warm good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for taking your time and joining today's webinar. I'm Santosh Mahibin. I'm product specialist from ManageEngine ServiceDesk Plus team. And in today's webinar, I'm going to talk about our latest version 10.0 of ServiceDesk Plus, and I'm going to introduce you all to Request Lifecycle. I hope you all can see the screen and its transitions. So in today's webinar, we are going to take a classic example of a new asset ordering request. So we are going to see how an asset ordering request goes through different statuses or takes different turns. And we are going to see with ServiceDesk Plus how we could fit those processes in. So what we think normally happens, we think when a request is created by an end user, the request goes from open to in progress status, where the technician works on the ticket, provisions the asset, and the ticket is closed. So we think this process is really simple, streamlined, and it's a straight shoot. But what really happens over here is there are a couple of other statuses and transitions which we fail to notice, which means when I create a request as a requester, the technician who's going to work on this request is going to be guided with a couple of other options, such as like the approval. So only if the request is being approved, it's going to be assigned to a technician. And the technician is going to be notified at that point saying a request has been assigned, so notifications are required. And the technician is going to check if the asset is already there in stock. If not, they have to raise a purchase order, wait for the PO to come in, and then provision the asset to the user and close the ticket. Now, again, it's not just closed. When the request is waiting for approval, there are chances the approval might get denied, so the request is rejected. So we need to capture that status as well on the particular life cycle. Also, the user might think, okay, this request or the request that I've just put in is wrong. I'm just going to cancel the request. So these are things that needs to be accommodated on a particular request. Are we able to do it in today's scenario? So this is what really happens when we take a very simple asset ordering request as well. It doesn't go in a straight path. There are a couple of components that we have to make a note of. So let's take a couple of these scenarios, such as how a request can travel if it's canceled or closed or rejected, or even if I need to provision an asset. We are just going to see what are all these other transitions that it may take. So imagine the request is getting canceled. You have all these statuses where like you need to get approved, assigned to technician, but when I'm going to cancel the request, it's going to be right from open status. It needs to go directly to cancel. So that's the path I wanted to take, and that's what I wanted my request to go through. Likewise, how about if I reject the request when it's at approval stage? So while I'm creating the request, it goes to approval status, and the approver over there decides or figures out that this is a wrong request, so I'm going to reject it. So these are the exact three statuses the request has to go through. Now, how about provisioning an existing asset? So the request is created, goes to approval. Right from approval, it goes to assign request. The technician begins the work by moving the request to in progress status. And that's where they figure out that they need to check for availability of the asset. Now, the asset is there in store, so I'm just going to provision the asset to the user, close the request. Or the same case, if the request has been assigned to a technician and the technician begins the work by moving to in progress status, they figure out that they're out of stock. All right, then let's go ahead, raise a purchase order. Once the purchase order is through, I'm going to provision the asset and then close the request. So we have seen like 4 different scenarios where like how a request goes through canceled, rejected, or goes through a PO process, or just like gets assigned with an asset and gets completed. Now, these are all different scenarios of how a request can travel through. Let's look a little deeper and try answering what's next for each ticket. So where do I begin now? So what I've done is I have all my status on this board right here, and I'm right now at the beginning where like I'm at the open status. I could see three other statuses like either approval or begin the work or like have someone look into the ticket or check for asset availability. What is the path that I need to take for this particular request? So let's see. How about here, where I'm initiating the approval from open to get approval, and that's where I am at. So I want to get the approval done, so I'm going to take this particular route. Okay, so far it sounds good. So what's next? So now that we are at the approval status, what's next? Where do we need to go? So let's see what we get over here. All right, I'm going to assign a technician to my request. So I create the request, initiate the approval process, so it goes for approval. Once it's approved, I want it to assign to a technician. Now, what are the other two statuses that's visible for me? Begin work, where I'm going to move the request to in progress status, or check for asset availability. So looks like I'm working on it. So good. So from assign request, I'm moving the status to in progress, where I use a kind of a transition called begin work. Now over here, when someone's going to look at the ticket, they're going to get a picture like, okay, someone is working on it because the status is in progress. We are good. Then should I provision the laptop, or do I have laptop in store, or do I need to raise a PO because we are out of stock? Looks like we ran out of stock. So we are going to raise a purchase order right now. And then after a few weeks later, I just received my order. So asset is ready to be provisioned. So I received the asset, provisioned the asset to the user, and that's it. That's one request down, and there's a lot more to go. So as you could see, the request just took a very simple path, a guided path, and upon each action, like after approval, it goes to assign, and in assign, I can set it to a technician to begin work. So it just took a particular path. So which means I was getting only one option at a time and not all the options. So, so far, ServiceDesk Plus has been static up until now and trying to fit everything into one size. So what we were doing so far is like have all the statuses available, just have everything readily shown for the technician. So what are the complications it comes into? A request can take any path to completion in today's case, which means there is no determined sequence at all. And what am I going to show to my technician at what particular status? So right now I'm just showing all the fields, or there is nothing to control on tickets. And all the information that I'm collecting on a ticket is exactly before the submission of the ticket. So I'm not getting parts or pieces of information as the ticket progresses in today's case. And there are standard notifications that we send out to the user or to the technician. So when a ticket is assigned, I just have one notification that goes out that says the ticket is assigned to a particular technician. Or if the ticket is closed, the end user gets a specific notification, which is common across the whole application. So there is no differential notification that we could send. And too many choices available to technicians, leading to too many mistakes. So if there is no guided path, I can actually go pick and choose any status that I want. I either like end up closing a ticket even before it's analyzed, or I move to wrong status that triggers out the wrong notification that causes the confusion. So these are all the issues that in today's help desk technicians or users face. So this is where I'm going to introduce you all to request life cycles in ServiceDesk Plus. So over here, I have a schema of how a request from start to end travels through different statuses with the help of its transitions. So between every status, I have transitions that's going to guide my request from one point to the other And we're going to see in detail how it could be handled through ServiceDesk Plus. So building a request lifecycle involves transition. So transition is a characteristics of a path from one status to the other. There could only be one transition between any two statuses. So the actions on transitions, we are going to see what it involves and what they are and how they could be used. So we have three transition actions such as before, during, and after. And what each of these transition actions does is before even you move a request from open status to either assign or open status to approval, you can choose roles based on criteria. So what roles are authorized to even see or make the status change? And while the status change is happening, when I'm exactly sending it for approval, I can mandate certain fields to be filled in. I can even stop the request from even being processed if it doesn't meet my criteria or execute custom scripts. And after it moves from open to approval status or so, I can execute scripts or I can even send out custom notification just when the request moves from one status to the other. So over here, just for a transition, I can send out a custom notification. How can you use these transitions? So let's take a look a little deeper. So these actions on transitions, what are they and how do they work? So in a before transition, we have role-based, restrict roles based on criteria. That's exactly to restrict access. So how do we work on it? We restrict the access for it. And during the movement from one status to the other, I can mandate fields, uh, stop the request from being processed or execute a script. So what I'm doing is I'm gathering request information or I abort the request process or I execute a custom script. And in the after, like once the transition happens, I can run a script again, or I could trigger out a custom notification for that particular operation alone. So these are the transitions, these are the actions that you get, and what they are and how they come into use on a request life cycle is what we have seen right now. So I'm going to take you into the product and I'm going to show you what ServiceDesk offers and how we could build the request lifecycle and what are the other small features or the major changes as well that we have introduced in version 10. So if you're an administrator, if you're logging to ServiceDesk the first time, on the bottom right-hand side corner, you would have noticed or you would be expecting a small circle which has a, which would pop up saying you could view the demo. So we have a video of how request lifecycle works. Now, before me getting into the lifecycle, I just want to show you how the current status of a request looks like. So I'm going to create a request over here. So you've all seen templates, you have all seen these fields, but I'm just going to quickly create one request over here. So the request is created. And once it's created, if you look at the details page, this is the enhancement that we have introduced in 10.0 along with request lifecycle. We have changed the details view of the request towards the extreme left. The user can see, the technicians can see their tickets. So rather than going to the request list view, they can just pick on tickets right from the left-hand side. And in the center is where you're going to get the details, the resolution tasks, work log. You scroll down, you get the entire details of the ticket. On the right-hand side, if you notice, there is status. And when I click on status, I'm exposed to all these request statuses, which gives me privilege to like move between any status and get along with that. Now, this would cause wrong notifications to be triggered out. Then I have to like change the status. So when the technician is exposed to all these statuses, this issue happens. Now, I'm going to take another case just to show you how it differs on a different scenario. So earlier we saw the user was exposed to all the statuses and a wrong status was chosen. Now, in this particular case, if you look into the right-hand side, I get something called as transitions. And when I look into the status, I just get two extra statuses being shown. Now, earlier we saw there was a huge list of status, but right now I can just see three statuses, two transitions, and these are all what I have on my ticket. So this is what request lifecycle does on a particular ticket. It restricts the access. It gives you a limited scope, guiding the technician where they need to go. So we have customers asking us like, we have problems educating our technicians because they can choose any status on a ticket. So we literally have to put up a document saying for this specific type of request or a VIP request or a high priority request, or if it's an asset ordering request or a new hire request, these are the processes you have to go through. These are the statuses you have to go through. Now, on a piece of paper, it looks good, but there are chances where we may oversee them or we may choose wrong options while working on the ticket. So that's where request lifecycle comes in to guide the exact status and its transition on the tickets. Now, I'm going to the admin tab. I'm going to request lifecycle, and also the first time you go to admin request lifecycle, you get the video playing automatically. If you want to take a preview of the video, you can click on this icon and the video is ready to be played. So this is another announcement. So if you're looking for a video of request lifecycle, you have it right there. So let's create a lifecycle. I click on new. I'm going to create a new lifecycle for my asset ordering process. So I'm going to say new laptop process, and I'm just going to pick my service templates. So there are incident and service templates that you could pick and choose. So I've associated my service template. If you want to pick any other template as well, you could do that. I'm clicking on save. So what you're seeing here is a canvas with a predefined structure of a life cycle. So this is a standard request life cycle that we are offering when users create a new life cycle. So the best or the easiest way to go about is take a paper and pen, figure out what statuses you need. So the moment you figure out what statuses you need, the first thing you would have to do before even start working on the life cycle is go to admin, go to status, and create the corresponding request statuses that you are planning to use on your request lifecycle. So this would be your primary step. So figure out the statuses that you need, create them right there in the system, and then go create a new lifecycle, choose the template, and here we are. So on the right-hand side, you get all the available statuses. On the left-hand side is the canvas where you're ready to go ahead and build your lifecycle. So what I normally do is go remove all these because I wanted to create it my way so that I am pretty sure I'm covering all the process. So just bring these up where I could like work with a smaller area. So I have start and I have end. Now, according to my asset ordering process, first thing is I'm going to bring in the statuses that I'm going to use on this particular life cycle. So I'm going to use the open because from start to open, this is the standard process when a user is creating a request. So it goes to open status. And from open, I want approval pending. So I wanted this to be placed right next to my open status. So the UI is really awesome where you have a guided dots where you can easily place the boxes and it makes the arrangement really good. So once it's been approved, I want the request to be assigned to a technician. So I'm going to place it right over here with some spaces so that my transitions, while I'm defining them, they get a better clarity. Then what's next? From assign, I want to move to in progress. So remember in our case earlier, we saw once a ticket is assigned to a technician and for the technician to say like, I'm working on the ticket, I need to have a status called in progress, so I'm going to include this. Then there are two cases where you either provision the asset or raise a purchase order right from in progress. I'm going to bring those statuses right in. So I'm just going to fit it right here. Asset provision, I'm going to fit that status as well. Now, what's next? Either the asset, once the asset is provisioned, I'm just going to close the ticket. So I'm going to bring in the close status right over here. Now, remember in our case, we saw a request can either be closed, canceled, or rejected. So I want these closed statuses as well, or these completed statuses as well onto my canvas. So I'm just going to bring them right in and then reject it. Now, as you could see here, there are no connections, but all I have done is I've brought in my relevant request status into my form. So just going to move this a little bit lower. There it is. What's next? Once you get the statuses right into the form, the next is you need to connect them, and you need to also do the transitions from each status. So from start, it goes to open status. So I'm not going to do the transitions right now, but I'm going to draw the map for me first. Then from open, I need to send it to approval. So there it goes. It goes to approval. Now, what is the other path it could take? From open, I can just go ahead and cancel the request because I just noticed I made a wrong move. So I'm just going to cancel this request. There it goes. What next? Once the request is approved, I need to assign it to a technician. So the plus symbol denotes that you're ready to drag the lines. The cross or this particular symbol that you're looking at represents you can move the field. And this is like you can move the whole canvas. So I'm just going to look for a plus again. From approval, what if it's denied? I want it to be rejected. So there it goes. Likewise, even on the approval status, I can also cancel my request. So I just want this line to go all the way around like this. Now, the view is kind of tricky. I don't want lines to overlap. So what I'm doing is I'm just dragging it all the way. So there it goes. So I'm just making this more legible so that the lines don't overlap, as well as I can move my transitions to be on a very legible area. So we'll come to transitions in a while. So from approval, I can either reject it or even cancel the request. That's sorted out. Now, from assigned, I'm going to begin my work. So I'm moving to in progress. And from in progress, I can either raise a purchase order, or I can even like provision the asset. Now, if there is a purchase order that is raised, I would need to move to asset provision. So over here, let me click on it and move to asset provisioned. So once the asset is provisioned, the request is going to be closed. And once it's closed, that's where the request lifecycle process ends. So here I am. So let me just beauty it a bit. Yeah, the line is straight. Now, even from rejected, once the request is rejected, there is no process, there is no requirement to have the request running. So I'm going to end that process. Likewise, from canceled, if the request is canceled, I'm just going to end it. Now, if a request is closed and if I wanted to reopen the request, that's where I am going to use this particular transition from closed directly to open and move the line. Now, once I've done all of this, I'm going to define my transitions. So transitions are nothing but from open to close status, or from start to open, what are all the actions that you wanted to do? So before that, I'm going to start naming them. So this is my start phase. So from start to open, this is where I start the request. From open to approval, this is where I'm going to initiate the approval process. So I'm initiating approval. From approval to assign, this is where I'm assigning the technician. So I'm going to choose this particular transition. And from approval directly to canceled, I'm just going to say cancel because the technician or the user decided like, okay, the request has to be canceled. So there it is. Now, from approval, if the request has been denied approval, I'm going to move it to rejected status. So there it is. The request is rejected. Now, from assigned to in progress is where the technician begins the work. So if I use the begin work transition, it moves to in progress status. And from in progress to PO raised, I'm going to say it's for purchasing a new asset. So I'm going to use the transition purchase new asset. And from in progress to asset provision, it's about provisioning an existing asset. So I'm going to say provision existing asset. So once the PO is received, I'm going to say provision asset. So there it is. And then once the asset is provisioned, I'm going to say the request can be closed. And also from closed, if I need to just reopen the ticket, I'm going to use reopen transition. And finally, from open to cancel, I'm also going to name this as cancel. Now, what I've done, I have created my corresponding request statuses that I'm going to use in my request lifecycle. Step 1. Step 2, I'm going to choose the appropriate incident or service templates that needs to fall under this particular lifecycle. Step 3, drag and drop the corresponding statuses that you want on the canvas. Step 4, connect the paths, like how it needs to go from start to end, and make sure your paths are clear. Step 5, mark the transitions between those statuses, ensuring that all your transitions are filled in. If the transitions are not filled in, you cannot publish it. Now, what's next? We need to start defining how the transition needs to look or what happens on each transition. So let's say over here, so from start to open, so even before the requester clicks on add request, like when they fill the form and say add request, so let's just quickly take the request as well for comparison. So this is the template I'm currently working on. When a user is filling out the form and add request, I can validate and stop wrong or incomplete tickets from being submitted. So in our case, it's an asset ordering form. So which means the categorization has to be proper. So what I could say is I could create a new rule saying that validate category. So I can say if category is not hardware and the subcategory is not laptop, then I could use a function called negate, and I can just say you are creating a new laptop request, choose appropriate classification. So this way, when the user chooses the wrong categorization, the request will not be processed. Now, that's something I wanted to do exactly when the user is clicking on add request. Now, that's where the request goes to open status, and then right from open to initiate approval. So if I need to send the request for approval, I can also create transition actions for before, during, and after for this particular transition. And also, I'm going to show or take one other case for assigned technician. So once the request is approved, let's say, for example, and I need to assign it to a technician, I can do a couple of options over here. So on before, I could say the request has to be approved. So I could say approval, which means if approval is approved, then show the other transitions. If it's not approved, it's not going to show the other transitions. Likewise, so this is before, and once the condition matches and from approval pending, if it's going to go to assign, in during, I can mandate certain fields. So this is what we were talking about, showing or populating the right information at the right time, and also not getting all the information on a ticket even before the submission, which means like even before clicking on add request, you don't want users to fill in, or you don't want all the information to be gathered. So you could pick a time and scenario where you need to get the information. And also, after the status change happens from approval pending to assigned, I want to send a dedicated custom email notification to the technician or to the user as well, stating that the request has been assigned. So I have a couple of these notifications already available. If not, I can also create a new template. So these templates are created right from within your request lifecycle. So this is where you create the template. So you can give a template name. The best part is the subject has a couple of dollar variables that you could use. So just hit dollar, and all the fields on this particular request form has been fetched in, which includes the default fields and the additional fields. So you can choose the dollar variables on the subject line as well as on the description. You could choose dollar variable along with a couple of other content. So I've already created a form for assign notification. So there it is. And I can say dollar requester and the technician. So I could say ticket owner is going to be the technician. So right now, what I've done is I'm choosing a custom notification when the request is assigned to a technician. And I'm saying here, notify the requester and the ticket owner. So there we go. So I'm going to save it. Oh, I need a rule name. Assign notification, and I click on save. So what I've done is right from start to assign, I've deleted the transition by mistake. So let's quickly say categorization. And so what we could do is right from start to open, I can validate fields, make sure that the fields are correctly filled in. If not, I can negate or stop the request from being processed. And from open to approval, I can define my transitions. So from open to approval process, I can define transitions. From approval to assign, I can again define a couple of these transitions over here, and I can say what needs to be done before even the particular statuses are shown, and while this condition satisfies, and while you're moving from approval pending to assign, what operation needs to happen in the during, and once the status change happens, what needs to be done after that. So in my case, I'm also sending out a custom email notification. So if you look at this, it may look like there are so many options to do, but this actually saves a lot of time, because not only you're just closing the request, you are also capturing other statuses as well, like canceled or rejected for a particular case. Also, rather than relying on a specific set of default notification templates, you are given options to define custom email notifications on each transition and on the after transition action. So if you pick any transition for that matter, the after operation, you can define custom notification, which goes out to different set of users. So these are all the benefits you get. So once you define all of your transitions, your transition actions, you can click on Save Draft. So make sure you publish them once you save your draft. So in my current scenario, I've already created one, which I'm going to show you in a while. So no template can have two different transitions associated. Two different life cycles associated. So if you pick a template, that can only be associated to one life cycle. So you can't have more than one life cycle on a template. So make sure you save the draft and publish. So once the life cycle is published, and if you go into the into the template under admin, service catalog, and if you go into that specific template, you can see under the workflow tab what lifecycle is published. So I have a laptop request lifecycle. Likewise, if you go into the lifecycle, you can see what template it's been associated with. So this is how we could verify the lifecycle and the template matches. And also, if you are making a change on a transition, like say you're either deleting it, deleting the rule, or you're adding some options over here, make sure you save and you publish. The operation you do over here is specific to this particular transition, but for this to get effect into the life cycle, you need to save and you need to publish. Now, this is how you configure the life cycle. But if I wanted to see on a single view, what are the statuses, what are the transitions, and what are the transition actions, I can use my linear view. Over here, I have my status, and I can expand all for this particular status, and I can see what's the transition, what's its action, and what are all being configured for that particular transition. So for each status and the transitions, I can view all the actions that's been configured in a linear view. So I can switch between the graph view and the linear view while creating a life cycle to get a picture of how it's been configured. Now, I'm gonna take you back to my life cycle that I've created earlier. So this is what I've created. I've associated this with a template. Now let's create a ticket and see how it works. So I go into my particular service catalog and choose my request a laptop template. The requester is Santa, and I'm in a real hurry to get my laptop done. So I'm just going to choose some values and I'm going to click on add request. Now what the system does is I have created the negate option. So from start to open, if my category and subcategory is not hardware and laptop, the request is not going to be processed at all. So this is how you could validate the request that is being submitted. You can also make fields mandatory. So even though you don't have it on the template, but you have it on your lifecycle, this would get the precedence. So I can even like set my category as mandatory. So that way it would immediately reflect with the star on the template. Now I'm just going to click on add request and let me see what happens. So the value that I chose got reset. So which means while clicking on add request, and if the request values don't match with the request lifecycle, the entire values would get reset. So that's what happened. I'm clicking on add request right now. And there we go. I get like pending approval as my status. I get to see initiate an approval process according to my lifecycle, or either cancel the request. But let me see if there's a back door where I can jump off the statuses. No, I just get a I just get a handful of request statuses over here. So I can't even jump the status. So let's go with the approval process right now. So I am initiating the approval. Now, once I do that, I can still cancel my request, but I don't see any other transition showing up. So I go to the approval status, and here is my approval. I choose approve, click on save. The approval is done. I'm coming back to my request. And over here, yep, the approval is done. Now I get the next transition that's assign technician. And I click on assign. Now, remember, according to my request lifecycle that I've configured, technician is mandatory even before the request moves to assign status. So I'm going to assign the ticket to Santa and click on update. Yep, the technician has now been assigned. The status is now changed to assign, and it now says begin work. So if I click on begin work, it means it goes to the next status called in progress. So now, as you could see, the request is just going according to the life cycle I have defined. Not all statuses are showing up. The valid status and its transitions are showing up. And also, let's take a look at the details view over here. If you look at the details view, the resource question section has been optimized a little bit where only the corresponding questions which are supposed to be answered are shown. And also, if you look at the conversation, we have like email, notes, and also system notification. There's a whole bunch of these notifications that are sent out. Now, let's see if our assign notification has been delivered. So I have a couple of these notifications, and here is the approval notification, and here is my assign notification. Remember, when the transition change happens from approval to assign, on the after transition, once it moves to assign, I have a custom notification created over here, and that is the notification that has been triggered out. So as you could see, we could stop incomplete or invalidated requests from being processed. I can execute scripts. I can send out custom notifications. I can show the right information at the right time to process the request. So this is how the request is going to process from here on. So I can say begin work, the status goes to in progress. And from here, I can either provision an asset or I can purchase a new asset. So I'm just going to say provision an asset. The asset has been provisioned. And once I confirm the transition, the request is closed. Since I have the option to reopen, it shows over here. But if you don't want the service request to be reopened once it's closed, you can even remove this particular transition. But just make sure when you remove it, you save the draft and you publish it. Only then the changes that you make will come into effect. So what we have seen is how easily service request lifecycles can be built in ServiceDesk Plus, how it impacts on a particular ticket. We have seen the status, the transitions, how it goes through. So we have seen a complete workflow of request lifecycle. So let's go into our presentation. Now, all of us can make a request flow several paths to completion. So it's not just one straight path. You can have multiple ways for the request to get to completion. Then restrict access at different points, which means I can prevent certain operations from being performed using the negate. I can provide asymmetrical information. I can send out contextual notification at different points of a request fulfillment. So as you could see, rather than just sending out notifications which are system default, I can pick and choose during each transition at the after scenario. I can go ahead and send out custom notifications. So guide technicians one step at a time dynamically. So with this, I'm now concluding our today's presentation on request lifecycle. Thank you all for your participation. You can email us at hello@servicedeskplus.com with any of your questions, and we'll be happy to answer all your queries. Thank you so much for your time and patience. Thank you all for being part of this particular webinar. Have a good day. Thank you.